What's up, guys? Well, with the release of Scream 2022 this weekend, we now have 5 films in the Scream franchise to talk about. And per usual, after I've reviewed it, it's time to rank the franchise. So, I have reviewed all 5 of these movies. I released my spoiler-free review of Scream 5 yesterday. I do talk about a few spoilers after the rating. So if you want to get my more in-depth thoughts on all 5 of these movies, I'll try to drop cards, but I'll also just put a playlist link. You can go check out all 5 of those reviews. And it must be said, too, that 3 of these movies, I think, are very close in quality. I think I gave all 3 of them 4 out of 5 when I reviewed them, so mood very much will play a part in where these movies rank for me on what day of the week you ask me. I think that Scream, while not being my favorite slasher franchise by any means, I think definitively is the most consistent as far as quality, so got to give it up to them for that. 5 movies in, they haven't made a giant stinker yet, in my opinion. So, with that being said, starting off at number 5 in my Scream ranking is still going to be Scream 3. Now, I'll say this right up front. If Scream 3 is the worst film in your franchise, you're doing pretty damn good, especially for a slasher franchise. Scream 3's got some problems. I don't really care for the side cast, the actor characters that are brought in to portray the original characters in the meta Stab 3 movie. I don't think hardly any of them work. I've never really been even a big fan of Parker Posey, so even her character doesn't really do it for me. I think that the plot gets incredibly convoluted and exposition heavy when they're focusing on Maureen Prescott, a character that we never got to meet, and she's the big focal point of this movie and this hidden past and these mysteries. But with that being said, I like where the movie goes. You know, it's got some decent-ish kills. I've never really been a fan of Scream movies for kills, so I can't really hold it against this movie for following the same path that the other 4 movies did. You get to the end, awesome third act, awesome fight scene with Sidney and with Roman. The reveal that Roman is the killer is pretty cool. His motivations are at least cool. It'd take a little bit of a convoluted path to get there, but I enjoy his reveal. He's the only time in a Scream movie where he's been the sole killer. Everybody else has partners, so it makes him pretty badass. I like the returning legacy characters, of course, here, aside from Courtney Cox's bangs. That's been meme-worthy ever since this came out, but for a Scream movie, I think that it's entertaining. It's certainly the lesser experience to have in this franchise, but it's still a solid enough slasher flick. Now, before I reveal my number 4, like I've already said, I really think that this franchise is very consistent and very high quality, and every movie from here on up has gotten a 4 out of 5 or higher from me. So whatever's in my number 4 slot, that's not saying that it's among the worst of this franchise. It just means the other films are just slightly better for me, at least when you're talking to me today. My number 4, as of right now, is Scream 5. Now, I think that Scream was a damn good sequel, especially considering the fact that this was an entirely new team. There's no Wes Craven, there's no Kevin Williamson, and that was my biggest worry walking into this, was what is this going to look like? Is it going to feel different and fresh, or is it going to feel weird and not really fit with the franchise? Totally fits with the franchise. It is very tonally and stylistically consistent with the other 4 films. I think that the cast of characters here are pretty good, but that's one of the main reasons why it's lower on this list. I think they're among the lesser casts as far as entertainment value, as far as me personally getting invested in them. And if they decide to carry on and do a new trilogy with some of these cast members, maybe that'll change. But as of right now, they were just okay. The legacy characters coming back, I loved Dewey, who's not a character I'm particularly fond of. The other 2 kind of were just there, which is very weird to say for Sidney Prescott, that she was just kind of there. She's really only integral to the plot in the last 15 minutes of the movie. And almost to a degree where I would hesitate to say this, but I would almost say that Neve Campbell and Courtney Cox kind of phoned it in a bit for this one, or maybe the script phoned it in for them, I really don't know, but they weren't as dynamic as they normally were. So just as a whole, the cast of characters here was a little bit of a downgrade for me. But I thought that it was shot very well, it was paced very well. I thought that they set up a lot of really good jump scares and a lot of good tense sequences. There's a lot of meta storytelling regarding going back to the first movie and talking about the requel, like the Halloween 2018 style of sequel that we've been getting a lot of ever since that movie came out, and talking about toxic fandom. So I was pleasantly surprised at not only the cleverness, but the creativity of how they were able to actually comment on the state of horror and the state of movie fandom nowadays. I was afraid they were going to kind of taper back on the meta side of things. They probably went a little bit too far at times. It was a little bit too on the nose, a little bit too heavy-handed towards the third act, where I kind of appreciate more subtlety in that side of the storytelling, but I still enjoyed it overall. And of course, it must be said, I figured out who the killer was very early on, and that's a little disappointing. When you have a movie that's built upon the whodunit standard, when you can figure everything out very quickly, it kind of takes away a little bit of that experience for you. So this is a very solid Scream movie. Maybe when I rewatch it, it will climb up on this list. Like I said, it's the same exact neck-and-neck rating of the next two movies. Just as of right now, my mental ranking, this one is the third best of these middle Scream movies. Coming in at number 3 is going to be Scream 4. Now, Scream 4, I think, is highly underrated. I don't understand the people that say that this is a terrible sequel or that this is worse than 3, and I see that all the time. I'll never fucking understand that. The only things that I will hold against Scream 4 is they do this weird color correction thing with the lighting that's got this weird kind of glow to it in some scenes that's kind of jarring. It kind of makes the movie stand out in a negative way amongst the stylistic consistency of the other 4 movies. So that's a little bit of an odd choice. I think that there's certainly some missed opportunity here to comment on the state of horror back in, 2011. They just talk about remakes, which by that point in time had already kind of ran its course. That was kind of a mid-2000s thing. So there was more opportunities to talk about the state of horror and where horror was going that they kind of chose to hold back on a little bit. But with all that being said, I think that the cast of characters here is awesome. So probably my favorite cast of characters since the original, but it's very close with 2. These all have really good casts, but Kirby, especially, Hayden Panettiere's character, I thought that she was the best character in this franchise since Randy. I loved her. And spoiler alert for a mild second for those of you that haven't seen Scream 5. It's not a big detail, but in Scream 5, if you pay attention, when one character is looking at YouTube and looking at all the stab movies, there's actually a little link down there that says, interview with survivor Kirby, whatever her last name. So she's alive, baby. Maybe Scream 6 will get her back. Kirby's awesome. I really like Kieran Culkin. Is it Kieran Culkin or is it Rory Culkin? One of them Culkins. God damn it. It was Rory Culkin. So Rory Culkin is really good. I like Emma Roberts a lot. I really like the reveals of the killers, and they actually surprised me a bit, and especially at the time that they revealed who it was after that whole phone sequence. It was really cool. I even like the motivations. One other flaw with the movie is that the third act goes on too long. You know, there's a point where this movie goes batshit insane. You're like, holy crap, this is going nuts. And then it just keeps going and keeps going and keeps going. By the time you get to the hospital, it's like, okay, Jill, your plan has gone to shit. There's nothing else you can do. But she keeps going and keeps going. So that's another thing that holds back the movie a little bit. But I think that it's a very fun sequel. I like the whole remake style that they go, where they're killers using CCTVs and little hidden cameras to try to recreate the first film and all of that. I really, really enjoy this sequel. It's really just, it's fractions short of being my number 1. That's how much I really enjoy Scream 4. My number 2 is Scream 2, and for a long time this was actually my favorite, but the most recent times that I've watched it, there's just some small aspects of this movie that haven't aged as well, where my number 1, and you know what it is by process of elimination, has aged very well. So Scream 2, another great cast. I think that it does another really smart creative thing in commenting on sequels, which this kind of carried on the tradition that the first film really broke the mold with that meta storytelling. This one carries the torch very well. I love the killer reveals in this, and I love the actors that play the killers. I mean, you got Timothy Olyphant. This is honestly just one of my favorite actors ever, and I love his ridiculous performance in the third act as Mickey. I really enjoy having Jerry O'Connell in this movie. The whole opening is a really great opening scene, although it's ridiculous. There's no theaters and no screening that would ever look that crazy, but it's still a fun sequence. And I even really like how Sidney has evolved in this movie. Like, Scream is not one of my favorite slasher franchises, but Sidney Prescott is by far, to me, the most badass slasher final girl. I mean, she just kicks ass in every single movie she's in. She is not afraid. She doesn't take any shit. She beats the fuck out of Ghostface every single time, and I never stop buying it. Even 5 films in, I'm like, yeah, she would whoop their ass. So she's an awesome character. I like how they've evolved her here. The action sequences and the tension sequences are a little bit ramped up in this movie. There's car chases and explosions and stuff like that. So it's a very fun sequel. it just hasn't aged as well as my number 1. But like I said, 2, 3, and 4, I mean, they're fucking neck and neck for me. This is a damn good franchise. But of course, number 1 for me is the original Scream. Now, I took a long time to warm up to this movie. I was not somebody that fell in love with this in 1996 like 99.9% of the rest of you. It took a long time for me to really appreciate what Scream did and what it did for horror fandom. And I tell a funny story about it. Go watch my original review about why I had a bit of a mental block, an emotional block for Scream. But over time, I've grown to really like and appreciate this franchise. And over time, I've grown to really love this original film. I think that it was very smart, it was very creative, it was very unique at the time. It definitely gave a shot in the arm that horror, and especially slashers, needed in the mid-90s, where it was really starting to get dark as far as how terrible these movies were getting, aside from Candyman. Candyman was that shining light that nobody gives credit for. But Scream was just such a breath of fresh air, great cast of characters, great storyline, great commentary and love letter for horror and slasher fans, very smartly written the way that it kind of slowly unveils and then makes you doubt who the killers are, just to reveal that you probably guessed it from the beginning, but then you doubted yourself because we made you doubt yourself. The reveal of Billy and Stu was great. The third act, how it all goes bananas. You get great characters like Sidney and Randy and of course, Gale Weathers, and Dewey I wasn't a big fan of in this first movie, but he gets better throughout the franchise. But it's a horror classic. It's a slasher classic. So Scream for me, still number 1. It's very potential that one day they could do a sequel that I like more, because like I said, these top 4 for me are very close, but right now, Scream 1 is still the cream of the crop for the Scream franchise for me. So what do you guys think? What is your ranking of the Scream franchise? What do you think of Scream 5? Try to keep it spoiler-free down below, but if you absolutely have to talk spoilers, just go over to my review, or at least put a spoiler warning in a bunch of spaces. Don't be an asshole and ruin the movie for anybody. Still the first weekend. But let me know all your thoughts on the Scream franchise, guys, and we will talk about it here next week, I believe, on Wednesday. I had to check my calendar. Wednesday, we're going to do one more ranking video for the Scream franchise, and that's going to be ranking the ghost faces. So I'm going to take all of the killers, which right now we have 9 ghost faces, and no, I'm not going to be including the TV series. I never watched it, don't have any interest. So the 9 movie ghost faces, I'm going to be ranking them from worst to best. So stick around for that. Hit the subscribe button so you don't miss it. Please like and share this video. Help it get shared around and get some more views. I appreciate that very much. Thank you guys for watching, and as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean that you have to be.